and live.
Well, welcome to the final version of the Chuck Roast. I'm your host, David Johnson. I'm Chuck's best friend from college. I was a highly recruited athlete to UND. Chuck was a.
Hold on a second. Barry, can you? There you go. Thank you. Go. Try that again, David.
Okay. Start over?
No, you can just keep going.
Okay. Yeah, so I was the highly recruited football player to UND, and Chuck was a little known Rudy-like character from Bismarck, North Dakota. And I'd like to think that they put us here in the cleanup position here at the Chuck Roast to make sure that whatever tidbits of self-esteem Chuck has left are obliterated in this version of the event. And so I guess speaking of cleaning up, Chuck does always dress well and he cleans up nice, but I noticed today that he is again violating the first golden rule, is that your dress should never be louder than your wife. And Chuck has violated that. As far as my dress, I actually, my daughter Emily is a school teacher, but she is the professional stand-up comedian. And so she told me that since my original connection with Chuck is our college years together, I should wear the traditional UND logo when I'm telling a clean joke. And then I should move to the politically incorrect shirt when I'm telling a politically incorrect joke. And then finally, when I tell an off-color politically incorrect joke, I should switch to this shirt. And the problem is that my wife caught wind of that, and she said that the one thing that I have in common most with Chuck is that there's never been any women that wanted to see us take our shirts off. And so that kind of put the kibosh to that part of the event. But before we get started, we're supposed to take care of some business and mention and thank that there's matching donors supporting the North Dakota Safety Council's campaign. Not sure if I'm pronouncing this right. Pucklich,
yep.
American Crystal Sugar, BNI Coal, Bobcat, the planning team, Aflac, and if you visit the Giving Hearts website right now to donate to the North Dakota Safety Council, this group of businesses has been kind enough to match all of the donations up to a total of $3,600. So let's make sure that they have to pony up for that whole amount. Now, as I'd mentioned, Chuck and I, we went to college together in the 80s. And if you know anything about pop culture history, if you went to school in the 80s, you had to be devoted to watching David Letterman, to at least to some extent. That was kind of the common mantra of people that went to college in the 80s. And so what I thought I would start out with is I put together a top 10 list that Chuck's staff was kind enough to put in a PowerPoint of the top 10 things that you'll never hear Chuck say. And so if we could start out with number 10 on that list. Number 10, I don't like to golf when things turn competitive. Now, since Chuck is most often the best golfer and I am most often the worst golfer, we're in the foursomes, we're usually on opposite teams. And to give you an idea of how competitive Chuck is he'll often turn to me just to get in my head, even though I may be struggling, and he said, Dave, one benefit of being mediocre is it's always easier for you to be at your best. And so even under those circumstances, Chuck cannot turn off the competitive gene. All right, number 9 is 2 cases of sparkling water enough for the party. Now, I'm sure at the Safety Council, you've come to learn that Chuck takes the safety stuff very serious. And he's not only our designated driver most often, but he's the one that's cracking the whip to make sure that we actually do things safe and so on. But at the same time, when Chuck does party, it's not with sparkling water. You're not going to hear him say that.
We'll be getting to that later, David.
Yeah, number 8. No, we're vegetarians. You're not going to hear Chuck say that. I think even Lisa doesn't really hold that against him or blame Chuck. She told me that, you know, there's some people that like meat. For Chuck, it seems like more of a basic instinct, which maybe goes to the red meat thing of his competitiveness too. Number 7, Lisa, did you mail in that donation to Nancy Pelosi? Safe to say Chuck is not going to be saying that. In North Dakota, they like to limit their green energy to growing crops and the colors of the state university football teams and limit the green energy. In fact, I remember Chuck telling me a story that North Dakota had the choice of whether to take the University of North Dakota back in the 19th century or to have the state penitentiary. And they chose the state penitentiary because there were more jobs at the penitentiary. And I got to believe that it's some of those same direct descendants that have determined that the credo for all North Dakotans should be, you know, you should consume as many cornflakes and fossil fuels as you possibly can, which I guess, given the mission of the North Dakota Safety Council and them keeping safe a lot of the workers involved in those fields, I guess we will forgive Chuck of that temperamental bent. Now, number 6 then is you have to hand it to NDSU. That's some sustained excellence. Now, one of the cool things I think about Chuck leading up the North Dakota Safety Council is obviously he has to be friendly with all North Dakotans, which a big swath of them are obviously Bison fans. And I'm sure deep down that really, you can't feed that to the dog. I wish Tyler was on this call because one of my favorite stories is Chuck, we're out ice fishing and the dog eats the minnow with the fish hook, swallows it. Chuck takes him into the vet in town and they say, well, feed him the worst dog food you can possibly buy, which we just happen to make here in Perham, he tells them. So a nice, you know, local flavor. And then he also gives Tyler then the assignment that Tyler has to go through the dog's poop for the next 2 weeks possibly to see if the fish hook comes out. And so I told Tyler, I said, hey, you know, your dad's been super successful and but it's a great life lesson for you that that oftentimes life is like a big septic tank. The really big chunks come to the top. And so that you can explain to your dad that that's how he's enjoyed his success. He's one of the real big chunks.
He's the big floater.
Now
The big floater, yeah.
We saw
so
that
then-
earlier, Chuck, you in the pool, remember?
Yes, we did, unfortunately. I'm glad nobody else saw that here.
All right, and then number 4 is,
Hold on, Terry's multitasking. There we go.
okay, we don't keep firearms in the house. Now, obviously, one of the missions of the North Dakota Safety Council is to make sure that all workers have the personal protective devices that they all need. But I also think that one of the missions of the state of North Dakota is to make sure that all residents have a gun cabinet. And Chuck, being a true North Dakotan, lives up to that. So all his guns are safe, but he also lives up to the North Dakota spirit of keeping his firearms. Number 3 is duct tape won't fix that. Now, Chuck's not super mechanically inclined like I similarly suffer from, but we both like to try to fix stuff with duct tape. And I often notice that when I do visit them in North Dakota, that a lot of North Dakotans adopt the same thing. So I think instead of actually giving, most states have social safety nets to protect people. I think North Dakota just gives away free duct tape is kind of the impression that I get.
No
Now-
dates from Minnesota, if you guys haven't caught that.
And number 2 is I've always been a cuddler. Now, Lisa, now unfortunately for Lisa, I don't know, Lisa's not on this, I take it?
No,
Oh, that's too bad. The sad thing for Lisa, though, is that not only is Chuck not the greatest cuddler, but he also doesn't do a ton of the housework. Lisa once told me that the neighbor saw Chuck doing the vacuuming through the window, and they actually sent Lisa a get well card because they figured that Lisa must be incapacitated. That's how little housework Chuck does.
yeah, that's so not true. Anybody who knows me know that's not true.
All right, and then number 1 thing you'll never hear Chuck say is, "I'll take Shakespeare for 1,000, Alex." Now, the funny part about that, of course, is that Chuck is super smart, but he's, and I'd like to be able to say, just to roast him, that he's living proof that the world is run by C students, but Chuck actually is super smart, but he's a numbers guy, so he's not taking Shakespeare for 1,000. But actually, when I wrote that out the other night and sent it to your staff, I was thinking, well, that's not nearly as funny now that Alex Trebek died this year. But in any event, that was the top 10 list that I made up. Now, I guess that ties in, I was going to mention before we open it up for other stories, is that obviously when Chuck and I met, I was kidding about me being the great athlete. I was the Rudy type figure, and Chuck, I don't know if he was the highest recruited guy in our class, but he was North Dakota Athlete of the Year, and he was right up there in the most sought after recruits. And so my role actually was, the coaching staff knew that I didn't have much hope as a football player, but they also knew that I was a serious student, that I was signed up for the honors program, and that I think part of Chuck's scholarship deal and agreeing to go to UND was, hey, you better put me with a serious student because I'm a serious student. So I was like the only candidate they had that fit the bill. Well, it turns out I was too serious of a student because I had 8 a.m. class and Chuck had no intention of getting up before like 10. And so this is obviously before the internet, 1985, and you have to actually look outside to see the weather. And so I'd get up at 7:15 and open the drapes, and Chuck was convinced that I was doing it just to piss him off. And so the greatest thing about it was then that was also the era of spray deodorant. And so there might have been like one time that I accidentally sprayed the deodorant a little bit too close to Chuck's breathing zone, but he got super pissed. And so then once I knew how to get under Chuck's nerves, I might have done that like maybe 1 or 2 or 17 more times. And so we were off to really a rocky start as roommates. And so when the upper class guys came, we were there, Chuck, like a week with just the freshmen playing football. And so we're all thinking, I thought even I had a chance of playing football because none of the upper class guys were there. Well, when they showed up, I was still I had the animal spirits going. I'm like, hey, I'm going to show that I can play. And so you've probably all seen like remember the Titans type thing where you have, one blocker and one defensive guy, and then a running back has to run through the cones. Well, the first practice with the upperclassmen, they stick in like a 5th-year senior offensive lineman. I don't know. And I was gung-ho. I jumped to the front of the line. I'm going to show them, okay, I'll volunteer. I'll be the defensive guy. And my coach knew enough to know he'd seen too much of me as a football player. And he said, well, I got to protect him. And he tells Chuck's coach, hey, you got to put in a younger guy because this guy's going to kill this guy. And so Chuck's coach, I'm not saying he was a mean guy, but he had his own animal spirits going on. And so he said, okay, I'll just put Chuck in there because he knew that was just as big a mismatch, Chuck against me, as the other guy. And so anyways, long story longer, of course, they blow the whistle and Chuck absolutely, he's already got this incentive to hit me anyways from all of our run-ins as roommates. And he just crushes me and crumples me. Brand new artificial turf at UND. I think I'm the first person, maybe the last person, to sprain both ankles on a single play. Chuck just crumples me, and to his credit, he's gonna like pick me up. But this friggin' coach of his does like this, Mutual of Omaha Wild Kingdom, jumps on Chuck's back, and like he's gonna commit some sort of bestiality and celebrate like they just won the Super Bowl. And so Chuck can't even lift me off the friggin' ground. And so that was kind of like our, I don't know how we worked it out as, and became really good friends. Don't get me wrong, Chuck still like holds a grudge and he likes to have things his way. So he actually moved out of the room, and he of course did that. So we weren't roommates anymore, but he he'd always make sure that I got invited to all the football stuff. Even though I wasn't playing, he made sure that I was always part of the team that way, which I was always super appreciative of. And so when we became really good friends, we started double dating with Lisa and his wife now, and my now wife, Kelly. And so I figured I owed it to Chuck, since he kind of made me feel more part of the football team, that I figured, well, at least, I've never met anybody that's ever outkicked their coverage on a relationship as much as Chuck with Lisa. Lisa's beautiful, smart, fun, all these things. In the history of mankind, there's never been anybody that's outkicked their coverage more than Chuck in a relationship. And that actually might be an insult to mankind. I think we'd have to extend it to any animal that's had a vertebrae, has never found a mate that is so far out of their league than Chuck with Lisa, I'd say.
Wow.
So anyways, I
Hey,
felt
Dave,
like it was my
Lisa's not on
obligation
the
as a
call.
friend. What do I tell Chuck, to make sure that he doesn't screw this up with Lisa? And usually, friends, you think, okay, tell them, okay, Chuck, just be yourself. But I'm thinking to myself, well, I know Chuck when I was roommates with him. The worst possible advice I can give Chuck is to just be himself, because that's not going to work. And so I coached Chuck up with Lisa and said, hey, you got to be better than yourself. And so I bought Chuck a book. It was called The Power of Positive Thinking. And Chuck looks at it and he says, well, what the hell good is that going to do? And so I looked at him, I said, Chuck, you got to be better than yourself. And the funny thing about it was it actually kind of backfired on me, because when we would be out double dating, Chuck was always the super gentleman and set too high a bar. He rocked my canoe. And so here I was worrying about Chuck screwing up his relationship. And if anything, he set too high a bar. So it was a miracle that Kelly ever ended up agreeing to marry me. But I have a few more stories that I want, or at least a couple more that I wanted to share eventually, but I thought that it'd be better to maybe have others work into the mix a little bit, and then I'll pick up if Chuck's still standing and not, if we haven't totally obliterated his self-esteem by that.
There needs to be some rebuttal at some point, let's just say. I need to be taking notes.
No,
'cause you're,
that's
you're
why I'm the
right.
host, Chuck. That means I'm in
Your
charge.
stories
I
are
know
really
that's
mixed up.
difficult for you. Just
Difficult.
take a deep breath. All right. Okay. Who's our first volunteer?
Well, I got a quick question, Dave. Is there a chance that, if this goes haywire, you can mute Chuck?
Yeah, I'm sure we can do that.
Just some coaching before we start. Okay, good.
Good job.
You want me to go, David?
Okay. You do it.
You've got a crappy internet connection. We can barely hear you. I've been on all 4 of these calls. I've known Chuck for 30 years. I am Chuck's therapist, as indicated on the screen. I've been a lot of people in all these calls. But as you can tell, the top 4 quadrants, Chuck, Dave, Joe, and myself, we get together every year down in Arizona, roughly in about a month. And again, we can't wait to get the heck out of this cold, shitty weather and get down to Arizona and enjoy some guy bonding time. But with regards to guy bonding time, here we go. As we all know, Chuck's very competitive. We know that Chuck likes to enjoy a few alcoholic beverages now and then. But there was a time when we were up at Dave's cabin. I think it was during the summer. And Chuck's a very safety conscious individual. We all know that. We've heard lots of people say that. But there was one time that I was able to get him to get off his high horse. And David happened to have a sauna up at his place. And Chuck, you know where I'm going. I'm going to try to keep this clean, okay? Because we aren't going to get into things that are going to come back and bite us. But needless to say, we'd been drinking all day long. We played some golf. We did a little bit of fishing. It was getting dark and David said, hey, who wants to go take a sauna? Chuck volunteered. But before that, we decided to experiment. And when you go into the sauna, when you experiment, things happen. And Chuck, I have not seen a 6'5" guy ever come outside of his body. And I mean, Chuck's a great guy, but honestly, I've never seen a big guy fall like Chuck fell that night. I saw that picture that you guys had up on the website of him tackling that quarterback by the feet. That was similar to Chuck going into the snowbank as he was stumbling into the cabin. Oh my God. Chuck, there's been some great times in the past. There's going to be some good times in the future. I'm going to leave it at that. Let somebody else come in here and roast you.
Thanks, Jeff.
That's a good point. One of the funny things about our Arizona trips is that every year. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you've got crappy internet. I don't know what's going on. All of a sudden you sound like a monster.
Double.
That's better.
It's your mic. At least she has one, right, Emily?
Maybe somebody else will try to figure out my.
Go ahead, Joseph.
Is that better?
I'll go, sure. So as Jeff just mentioned, we're in our who knows 10th year playing golf together. And, when we're golfing, Chuck's not real competitive. Okay, so everything pretty much runs pretty darn smooth all the time, as long as he's winning. I mean, when he's winning, it is the most fun you've ever had. And often, Chuck and I are on opposite teams. It just works out that the way they don't let us play together too much. But the fun thing for me is our host here, Dave Johnson, is often my partner. And David is, you know what? He's not a bad golfer. He's a good golfer in his own right. But here's how it works. If we start out and, Dave makes a par, cool. It starts out really nice. Everybody likes it when you actually play well. If Dave maybe makes a second par in a row, and it puts the heat on, we're all still pretty happy. You can tell people are getting a little bit nervous. If Dave happens to make a third par in a row, well, then a little bit of smoke starts happening. And the thing I remember that you're going to laugh is by that time, Chuck's had enough. And he looks at Dave and he goes, Johnson, wake up. And the reason he says that isn't because, he's playing bad. It's because he's actually playing good, and Chuck just wants him to go back to playing normal. And for us guys, it's not so much that what he says is funny, and he means it I think he means it as a joke. I'm not for sure, but the fact that if we watch Chuck crack and get under his skin like that, to us, it's worth it. And I pray David makes 3 or 4 pars in a row every time we play, because I know I'll get to hear that.
No salmon shirts, Joe. No salmon shirts.
Salmon shirts, baby.
Your mic just all of a sudden went to Badland, Dan.
I can log in on my phone.
Who wants to roast Chuck?
There you go. Oh, Robin, there you go. Oh, have to hop. Shoot. Before you leave,
All right,
Robin,
I'll say a few things, Chuck, real quick. I'm running out the door, but I, clearly don't know the guy. I know that we spent a lot of time in church together and helping doing our service time together. So I'll defend you, Chuck, as not being so competitive, always being a great friend and looking out for others instead of winning. And gee, I just don't know who they're even talking about.
Rob, do
Anyway.
you work for Chuck?
Yeah, exactly. Is
This
your
a
review
roast,
coming
son.
up?
Who is this guy? I gotta hop though. Anyway, happy roasting, everybody.
all right, thanks, Rob. Rob Kessel is probably he's my oldest friend. We've been friends since probably 5 years old. So ultimately, yeah, he unfortunately, he probably had more competitive stories to talk about when him and I were 4 and 5 years old playing basketball with his father and his uncle. So
Hold up, David.
Yep.
There you go.
Oh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
turn one off, Dave.
What's that?
Yeah, turn one of them off.
Okay.
You're echoing.
All right. How about that?
You're
Still
good.
echoing.
Yep, you're back.
Okay. Yeah.
still echoing.
All right. Excellent. Yeah.
He's still echoing.
Got to shut the volume off on his computer.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. How's that?
There you go.
Perfect. Yep, you're
Oh,
back.
okay. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, well, thank you for that. Kind of reminded me of when we get ready for the Arizona trip. Jeff and Chuck and we try to go on a diet for a couple months before so that we're looking pool ready. And so it's kind of funny when Chuck shows up at the pool, I give him a hard time and takes his shirt off, and I give him a hard time about his Charmin physique being white and soft, and he responds that I'm not looking all that chiseled either. And so then I usually will tell him that, well, Chuck, you've been on a diet for 2 months and it looks like all you've lost is 8 weeks. And so that's usually how our trips start out, and then it kind of goes from there. But one of the follow-up things I wanted to talk about too, that as a kind of a follow-up to my initial story, is I had mentioned the fact that we ended up both marrying our college sweethearts, and Chuck actually had quite a bachelor party before his. I was scheduled to get married 2 weeks later. We're in the wedding party of each, and Chuck's bachelor party, wasn't it? It was like just 2 days before your wedding, I think. And so that was one of the nights, obviously, Chuck got in a bad way. And I think I was actually at least the designated driver to some extent, or his mom made me, give a blood oath that I was going to get Chuck home safe because we were staying at his house. And things kind of deteriorated, to say the least, at the bachelor party, to the point where Chuck, all of a sudden, he wanted to headbutt people to celebrate just how invincible he was. And I looked at him, I said, Chuck, that's not a good idea. And I'm scheduled to get married in a couple of weeks. And I'm not interested in any headbutts, but of course he found some of you Jack Pine savages from Bismarck that were still willing to headbutt him. And so he put this nice big welt in his head on his bachelor party night, 2 days before his actual wedding. And so we actually end up getting back to his house somehow.
Cab.
in the early AM, his mom greets us. Chuck, I'm sure doesn't remember any of this part, but his mom looks at me and says, Dave, do you think you can get him down the stairs? And I at that point, I'm thinking, well, I got the best chance of anybody. And so I try to like back him down the stairs, but kind of a la the first story I told you where he crumples me on the football field. This time, I think I had maybe more to drink than I realized. And he crumpled me backwards down the stairs. His mom's
Look at
watching.
this interesting ceiling.
Somebody likes your ceiling, Dave.
Yeah. Anyway, so, and then I look up kind of in horror at his mom, and I swear his mom looks at me and says, that's all right. If Chuck falls all the way to the end of the bottom of the stairs, his mom says, that's all right. Lisa's going to kill him anyways. And so that's kind of how that went. But in any event, that was one of the fun times. And like I say, we've gone on to, really be tight and do things together, both as couples and then as Joe and Jeff have indicated, as friends, and been at weddings for my kids and stuff. And to have, somebody that's a lifelong best friend like that has been a great thing. And we're all super proud of Chuck with the success that he's had with the North Dakota Safety Council. And so as much as I wanted this to be the true roast of roasts, we certainly do want to echo what we heard earlier with the other presentations about those qualities, because I think the North Dakota Safety Council is certainly very fortunate to have that kind of leadership. And so I guess if there's others that can chime in here or that wish to, I guess we can go from there, or I don't know.
So I'll say one more thing. I have to go, but I'll say one more thing before I go. So Dave, actually going off of one of your lists, you kind of talked about like the gun safe thing. So this is kind of more of a recent story, but so my dad has this big gun safe and we just moved, as everyone knows. And so I had like 2 big football players from UND that are like my age, my friends, gonna come help us move. So I was like, hey dad, like leave the gun safe. Like, he's so intense. He has like, everything has to be done. Like he can't wait for anyone, like whatever. So I'm like, just leave this. Like they're gonna be here at X time, like whatever. So obviously he did not listen because everything has to be his way. And he tries to move the gun safe alone and it's broken. So it slams open and cuts off the tip of his finger or whatever. If I don't know if anyone saw, I wish I had the picture so I could show you it. But I just remember my mom's like, honestly, I'm happy with his finger because I thought that he was going to literally have a heart attack. So I'm happy it was a finger and not whatever, but I just thought of that going off the gun safe. It just goes to how intense and stubborn he is and everything has to be his way. And then the boys come and they literally move it on the thing in like 2 seconds. So anyway, it's nice to see everyone.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Carly.
you too, Carly.
Bye.
Bye.
Love you.
To piggyback off of what she was saying, Chuck is so competitive that when we went up north,
Oh, yeah, there you go.
there you go. Oh my God. When we got up to Dave's place to play a little golf, he was golfing with that finger wrapped, bleeding, but boy, did he still hit the shit out of that ball. Pain or no pain, he did not want to lose.
There you go. That's the way I looked right there.
That's exactly right.
Never give up, man.
Never give up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to clarify, since we do have just a little bit of time, David, I had to clarify those people in my office that now have connected with you thinking that, the whole roommate thing, your memory's short. We both had 8 o'clock classes. Unfortunately, in your thinking that as a freshman, you had to get up at 5:30 and study, that was your, your way that you've continued on with. So it was 5:30, not 7:45 when you woke up. We both had 8 o'clock classes. And by 6:30, when you had made enough noise to wake up the dead, then you opened the curtain and let the light in. So it continued to wake me up. And then you sprayed your deodorant in my face multiple times. So yeah, anybody in their right mind would have probably not gone for that. And I think deep down, Dave just wanted to be room by himself. And so he drove me away. But it's an interesting story to the point that, sometimes things happen and, the tide turns. And as much as Dave and I did not get along that first month, the friendship surely changed quickly. So I can appreciate, Dave, you coming on like this and all you guys, because it hasn't been too bad, David. I was bracing. Let me say, was bracing for some more. So maybe holding back.
Another one is, see, if I would have played as much as you did, I'd probably have the similar kind of head injuries that impair your memories of those years.
Yes.
See, your scholarship was much more expensive than you ever realized.
Right.
And keep this in mind, Chuck, this is a PG-13 roast.
Right.
A lot more could have come out.
I'm sure.
Well, I was getting worried, Duffy. I thought you were giving some sort of Brokeback Mountain story.
No. It started going that route, but that's why I didn't quickly change it.
I thought maybe as the host, I was going to have to mute your computer.
No.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that my memory wasn't impaired of that event, because while you were talking there, I was getting awful nervous.
All right.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
All right.
Emily.
Yes.
You got nothing?
Where is she? So yeah, my daughter, the stand-up comedian, coached me up, but she's apparently got technical difficulties on actually chiming in to give a professional version of the stand-up abilities.
Maybe you can't hear her over Chuck's jacket.
Good one.
It is too bad that your wife's not on here, Chuck, because I'm sure some way we'd bring her into some of these conversations and it would definitely turn the other way.
I appreciate one of Tyler's friends, Parker Oswald, one of my son's friends, even is jumping on. And I know Parker, working for Senator Armstrong, that I know, and being the political environment, I know you like to talk. I cannot believe that in your years of coming over to my house and hanging out, that you wouldn't have something to roast me on.
Chuck, you're just too good of a guy. I've got nothing bad to say about you.
That's very nice of you.
Yeah.
Politically correct of you.
No, Chuck, known you for a long time now, and I got to say, I'm impressed that you've never had to bail us out of jail once.
Right.
Right. Still plenty of time for that, though, I guess, right?
Yeah, there probably is. I hope that doesn't happen. But I'd be there. I'd be there for you, Parker.
You might be with us in there. That's why.
Maybe. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, David, you're up, buddy.
All right. Are we okay? All right. Looks like it's time to wrap up, but we're supposed to remind everybody that don't forget. I guess there's some sort of sandwich that's named after Chuck, and if you go and purchase that in the next 2 weeks, they're donating a percentage of the proceeds to the North Dakota Safety Council as well. And so those funds will additionally support these same kind of efforts that the North Dakota Safety Council has going with keeping workers safe in the state of North Dakota. And if you get the low-fat sandwich, you can actually find a notch on your belt that's maybe better than Chuck's actual one. But I would say the card we have for promoting this thing is pretty complimentary to you. I don't think Chuck's actual belt size has ever seen that loop before. So safe to say that maybe the low-fat sandwich should be the one that Chuck should go for next. But in any event, thanks again to everybody, and thanks to Chuck and his staff for including us in this event. And hopefully you can make it some sort of a regular one. I know all of us would be happy to roast you as frequently as you would care to submit yourself to it, Chuck.
Yeah, well, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. It's been a good day. It's been a fun day. A lot of good reminiscing. And, you know, what I do want to say is I appreciate everybody and that there's been so much support. I mean, giving me crap, yes, but, you know, it's for a good cause. And I can tell you the Safety Council, we've had a great amount of donations today. I know, Kristen, that you, as our development director, I mean, we have a goal of $15,000 I know to try to get to, and ultimately we've been working towards that. And I appreciate everybody who's stepped up and supported us on that side of things. And it's all for a good cause. I can tell you the Safety Council's been part of my life now for 14 plus years. And it makes the mission is awesome, saving lives and preventing injuries. And that's what it's all about right now. And I thank all of you guys for participating some way in the mission of ours. So thank you.